The Blood That Binds by Sridas. Read by Chaz Burns. Part 1. Chapter 1. The cellar air, a living entity of cold and damp, pressed in from all sides, a constant, abrasive touch against exposed skin. It seeped into the man's bones, a pervasive chill that mocked the last vestiges of warmth within him, a chill that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. The flagstones beneath his bare feet were a torture of icy, unyielding grit, each tiny shard a needle point of discomfort against his tender soles. He registered the sensation with a detached part of his mind, as if his body were already a separate entity, a vessel for a pain that transcended mere physical sensation. The smell of mildew and stagnant water, heavy and cloying, mingled with the faint coppery tang that was becoming synonymous with his terror. It was the scent of old blood, of metallic decay, and it seemed to cling to the very lining of his nose, to the back of his throat, making every shallow breath a struggle. The rough fabric of the gag, a crude knot, digging into the sensitive flesh beneath his chin, tasted of dust and despair, a dry, fibrous presence that amplified his thirst to an unbearable degree, leaving his tongue thick and swollen. He could feel the coarse weave against his lips, the rough threads scratching, a constant irritant in his heightened state. His wrist bound tightly with scratchy, fibrous rope screamed in protest, the circulation long since cut off, leaving his hands numb, heavy, and alien. He tried to flex his fingers, but they remained unresponsive, curled into useless claws, a cruel joke of his own body. Every subtle itch beneath the rough ropes, every tremor of his muscles sent a jolt of pain up his arms, reminding him of the precariousness of his suspension. He was hanging, he realized again, from a hook somewhere above, the unrelenting pressure against his spine, a constant dull ache that throbbed in rhythm with his terrified heart. His shoulders screamed, stretched taut, threatening to tear from their sockets with every small shift of his weight. His joints twisted at unnatural angles, felt as though they were being slowly dislocated, a slow, meticulous torture. Sweat, cold and clammy, prickled his scalp and ran in slow rivulets down his back, gathering in the small of his spine, each drop a chilling confirmation of his despair. He shivered uncontrollably, a deep, rattling tremor that had nothing to do with the cold, but everything to do with the terror that had taken root deep within him. His skin felt strangely hypersensitive, every nerve ending screaming in protest, picking up the slightest change in the air, the most subtle contact. The darkness, absolute and profound, swallowed all light, but amplified sound. He strained his ears, his hearing unnaturally acute in the absence of sight, every distant creak and groan of the house above him a potential harbinger of doom. From somewhere deep within the house, muffled by layers of stone and floorboards, came the faint groan of old plumbing, a distant gurgle that spoke of hidden pipes and the quiet, ceaseless workings of the dwelling. Then a softer sound, like a mouse skittering across a distant attic floor, or perhaps just the settling of ancient timbers. He imagined, with a fresh surge of panic, what horrors might lurk just beyond the cellar walls, just out of his perception. The ceaseless drip of water, ancient and methodical, echoed from an unseen corner, each splash a miniature explosion in the suffocating silence, each drop marking the relentless dragging passage of time. Minutes bled into hours, indistinguishable. He found himself counting the drips, then losing count, then starting again, a futile attempt to impose order on the chaos. His mind, battered and fragmented, clung to intrusive memories like a drowning man to a spar, the scent of his wife's perfume, the low murmur of her voice as she read in the evenings, the warmth of his daughter's small, trusting hand in his. They were fleeting, cruel mirages, quickly swallowed by the oppressive reality of his predicament. He saw flashes, brutal and vivid, of what he knew would happen to him. Images of glistening blades and dark, flowing liquid, and his breath a strangled sob caught in his throat. These visions were so real, so visceral, that they blurred the line between thought and immediate sensation. Sleep offered no escape, only strange, dreamlike distortions where the cellar walls seemed to melt and reform, where the cold was a living thing that crawled beneath his skin, and the distant drip of water became the steady, mocking beat of his own dying heart. He fought against the pull of unconsciousness, desperate to remain present, to cling to the last shred of his own reality, knowing that to succumb would be to surrender entirely. The cellar itself seemed to breathe around him, a vast, oppressive lung of stone and earth. He could feel the slight draught, a movement of air that suggested unseen passages or cracks in the ancient foundation. The architecture, though unseen, was impressed upon his mind by touch and sound. Rough-hewn stone blocks, cold and pitted against his cheek when he swayed, a low, vaulted ceiling suggested by the echoes and the ever-present smell of damp mortar. There was a particular subtle scent, like disturbed earth, that hinted at deeper excavations, at secrets buried for centuries. He tried to construct a mental map of his prison, but the darkness was too profound, his disorientation too complete, his perceptions layered upon themselves, each terrifying sensation reinforcing the last, creating a suffocating tapestry of psychological distress, the cold, the pain, the silence, the rhythmic drip. They merged into a single, overwhelming experience. He was dissolving, slowly, piece by piece, into the darkness. Then a new sound, distinct from the cellar's natural decay, sliced through the oppressive silence. A faint sheen. And then another. And another methodical scrape of metal against stone. The precise chilling sound of a blade being drawn across a whetstone. It came from upstairs, from the unseen world above him, a relentless, deliberate rhythm that resonated through the floorboards, vibrating through the crude hook that held him suspended, sending a fresh tremor through his already ravaged body. Each stroke was an intimate violence, a promise of what was to come, a sound that spoke of unhurried preparation, of a purpose both ancient and terrible. He tried to count the strokes, to make sense of the endless repetitions, but the numbers dissolved in his mind, replaced by a throbbing ache behind his eyes. The scraping seemed to accelerate, then slow, then stop. A pregnant pause that stretched for an eternity. He held his breath. Every muscle taut, his eyes straining for the next sound, for any sound. His heart hammered against his ribs. It came, a soft, low creak from above, the subtle protest of an old floorboard, then another and another, slow, deliberate footsteps, each one laden with an unspoken weight, growing steadily closer. He imagined the figure unseen moving through the house above, a predator stalking its prey with an almost meditative calm. He heard the faint, distinct squeak of leather soles against wood, a sound that resonated with intimacy. The footsteps paused directly above him. For an interminable moment he could almost feel the presence, a heavy, silent pressure emanating from a weight that seemed to press down upon his very soul. The air in the cellar seemed to thicken, to grow heavier, suffused with an unspoken dread that pulsed in rhythm with the approach. He could almost discern the subtle change in temperature, the faint scent of old fabric, of something that had been kept in darkness for too long. Then the soft, low groan of the cellar door unlatching, a sound that tore at the very fabric of the silence. A sliver of weak yellowish light, impossibly bright after the absolute darkness, cut into the gloom, revealing nothing but dancing dust and the raw, unadulterated terror reflected in his own wide, unblinking eyes. The light grew, expanding as the door swung open, revealing the outline of a figure framed against a deeper, less oppressive darkness. Huseevo. The name, a cold, hard stone in his mind, a deepening of the despair. He descended the creaking wooden steps, each tread slow. He wore old, soft shoes, the leather creaking faintly with each step, a sound that seemed to mock the beating of the man's heart. Huseevo's silhouette was imposing, strangely unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. There was no hurriedness in his gait, no impatience, only a profound calm. He carried no torch, no lamp. The light seemed to emanate from him, or rather the terror he inspired illuminated the space around him. The air shifted with his presence, growing colder, denser, imbued with a faint scent that was both deeply unsettling and oddly familiar, a smell like forgotten iron and damp earth, yet something else, something cloying, sweet and primal. He stopped at the foot of the stairs, a silent, watchful presence, his breathing slow and even, a chilling counterpoint to the man's ragged gasps. Huseevo's shadow, long and distorted in the weak light, stretched across the rough stone walls, a looming, silent threat. Huseevo's eyes, when he finally turned, caught the faint light, glinting with an ancient, inscrutable intelligence. There was no malevolence in them, no malice, simply a profound, unsettling placidity, as if he were observing a natural process, a necessary act. He seemed to assess the man with an unnerving calm, lingering on the victim's face, on the terror that was an open book for him to read. His hands, gnarled and surprisingly delicate, moved with fluidity. He set down a small ceramic bowl, its surface gleaming faintly in the sparse light, and the soft clink resonated with unnatural clarity in the oppressive silence. His fingers, long and thin, traced the rim of the bowl for a moment, a tiny gesture of contemplation. He then reached into a worn leather satchel, a bag that seemed to belong to another century, its leather aged and supple, smelling faintly of old herbs and something indefinably earthy. He began to remove his tools. Each one was wrapped with meticulous care, a collection of knives varying in size and curvature, from a small, wickedly sharp blade no bigger than a thumb, to a long, slender instrument that seemed designed for filleting, their blades catching the light with a cold, hungry gleam. There was a long, thin needle, its point glinting, a small, curved scoop, and a blunt, heavy instrument that sent a fresh wave of nausea through the victim, an unvoiced question of its purpose hanging in the air. He lingered over each one, examining its edge, its weight, its balance, as if preparing for a delicate surgical procedure. He seemed to contemplate their purpose, their history, in a silent, ritualistic communion, his movements almost reverent. Then, from another pouch within the satchel, Huseevo produced a handful of dried herbs, pungent and strangely sweet, permeating the damp air, momentarily masking the coppery of the cellar. He crushed them between his fingers, a faint rustle of brittle leaves, releasing their essence into the space. He bent low, his body a silent curve, and with a piece of white chalk drew a series of intricate symbols on the stone floor, each line forming a complex pattern that seemed deeply potent, the faint scrape of chalk against the stone. Low words that were not English, but resonated with a primal power, fragments of an ancient Hungarian dialect, perhaps, or something even older, something whispered across centuries. Ver elit, visateres. Blood, life, return. The words, though incomprehensible, sent shivers down the man's spine, a deep, unsettling resonance, time stretched and distorted, each second a minute, each minute an hour, the ritual unfolding with terrifying slowness. He could feel the cold of the stone through his skin, the subtle vibration of the floors. As Huseevo moved, he tasted blood in his mouth, a phantom taste of what was to come, a premonition that chilled him to his core. The air, thick with the scent of herbs and stale fear with an unseen energy. When Huseevo finally approached, his movements were disturbingly gentle. His touch reverent. A large, calloused thumb brushed against the man's temple, surprisingly cool, and for a fleeting moment, a strange electric current seemed to pass through him, not painful, but profoundly unsettling. The sharpened blade came next, the longest of them glinting with a malevolent sheen as it caught the scarce light. There was a soft whisper of movement, a rustle of Huseevo's dark, worn fabric, and then a profound, aching pressure. The muffled screams began. Not his own, but those of the other prisoner, the huddled shape he had glimpsed earlier, now brought into the faint light of the ritual. The sound was a desperate animal cry, a strangled protest against the inevitable, swallowed by the thick air of the cellar. Silence, a sickening, wet sound, like something tearing, then a heavy thud as the body sagged. Blood, impossibly bright in the gloom, poured into the waiting vessel, a grotesque sacrament. The coppery smell intensified, thick and overwhelming, filling his nostrils, coating his tongue. He gagged again, fighting the urge to vomit, his body convulsing, his stomach churning with revulsion and fear. As the cries died down, replaced by the soft, steady gurgle of liquid filling ceramic, Huseevo's face remained impassive, as though he were simply tending to a chore rather than presiding over an act of ultimate violation. He watched the flow with an almost scientific detachment, occasionally adjusting the vessel with a tiny, precise tilt, his fingers brushing the ceramic surface, his thoughts perhaps on the quantity required, the purity of the offering. There was no visible emotion, no flicker of satisfaction, only a profound, almost chilling focus on the task at hand. His breathing remained slow and even, a testament to his composure, his alien understanding of the moment. He moved the vessel aside, then with a smaller, hooked instrument, he carefully extracted something unseen, a soft, pulpy sound, and placed it into a separate, smaller glass jar. The man's mind reeled, trying to comprehend what unspeakable horror was transpiring. Silence descended, broken only by the distant mewing of a cat, a tiny, innocent sound from the world above. Huseevo, with the precise, unhurried movements of routine, finished his grim task. He meticulously cleaned his tools, wiping each blade with a dark, absorbent cloth before packing them away into the worn leather case, securing the straps with a soft snap. The sounds of the cleaning were almost domestic in their rhythm, a mockery of normalcy. He then collected the dark, vicious liquid, pouring it carefully into a small, stoppered glass bottle, its surface gleaming faintly, reflecting the dim light like a captured eye. He handled it with a reverence that transcended mere utility, cradling it in his hands, as if it were something sacred. There was no sign of haste, no flicker of emotion on his composed features. He secured the lid, the soft pop echoing unnaturally loud in the oppressive quiet of the cellar. His movements were a study in each gesture refined by years of repetition, by a lifetime of this macabre ritual. He ascended the creaking steps, each wooden board groaning under his weight, carrying the bottle as one might carry a sacred relic, leaving the profound cold and the lingering scent of copper to dissipate slowly behind him. From beneath the chipped porcelain of the sink, a sleek black cat emerged. She stretched languidly, her body a sinuous curve of ebony fur, her tail flicking once, twice, a silent question, a subtle invitation, her eyes luminous green gems fixed on Huseevo with an intelligent, almost knowing gaze, expecting her ritual, crossed the worn linoleum, her paws making soft, almost imperceptible steps, a tiny, graceful shadow in the dim light, her whiskers twitching faintly. Huseevo, with a faint, almost acknowledging smile playing on his lips, a fleeting curve that seemed alien to the grimness he had just left, poured fresh milk from a glass bottle into a saucer. The milk, thick and white, formed a perfect circle against its creamy surface, catching the nascent morning light. He peeled the foil cap from the milk bottle, the taste of it, faint and almost nostalgic, lingering on his tongue. "Now, my little sister," he murmured, his fingers surprisingly nimble, stroking the cat's sleek fur behind her ears, a moment of tenderness that seemed utterly out of place. "This will keep you happy, and will hopefully help mend that leg of yours." Eeshmeroosh purred, a rough, comforting vibration that seemed to fill the small kitchen. Her tail now still, her attention fixed on the saucer, her ears were pricked, listening to the soft murmur of his voice, a sound she clearly understood and trusted. "Here we go, Eeshmeroosh. Get strong and get fast. Then you can escape the fight next time, eh?" The cat, accustomed to this morning ritual, dipped its head into the saucer, lapping contentedly, a picture of feline bliss, her small tongue rasping against the ceramic. She looked up at him for a moment, her green eyes unwavering, before returning to her meal. The radio perched on a small shelf near the window crackled to life, tuned to a station playing the tinny pop music of the 1980s. A saccharine synth pop melody filled the air, a voice singing about broken hearts and endless summers. The lyrics shallow and earnest, a stark contrast to the horror that had just transpired below, grated against the quiet, creating a jarring, almost unbearable dissonance. Huseevo, seemingly oblivious to the music, or perhaps finding comfort in its mundane rhythm, watched the cat, a man tending to a beloved pet, utterly composed, utterly normal in the chilling aftermath of what had transpired below. His mind, even as he observed Eeshmeroosh, was likely already drifting to the next task, to the long, quiet hours of solitude, to the ancient purpose that dictated his life. He picked up a crumpled newspaper from the side table, its pages yellowed with age, its headlines from weeks past, and settled into a worn armchair by the window. the soft light of the morning just beginning to filter through the grimy panes, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. He unfolded the paper with a ritualistic movement, the faint rustle of the pages, another counterpoint to the distant pop song, a discordant melody of the past and the present. He adjusted his spectacles, a small private gesture, and began to read, his face a study in serene detachment. The gentle rhythmic lapping of the cat, the tinny pop music, the rustle of the newspaper, all conspired to create a sense of mundane domesticity, a chilling veil over the unspeakable acts that had just concluded in the darkness below.